Well, we're winning on this podcast, even though the White Sox aren't winning at all. Welcome, everybody, to Believe in White Sox here on the Believe Podcast Network. My name is Greg Moraz, your host, as always. What a time to be alive. What a time to be a White Sox fan. What a time in our baseball fandom. Hit like, hit subscribe on the YouTube page, hit subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you leave a 5-star rating and review. We have not gotten a ton of reviews, but I am hopeful at some point that we are going to get some more of them. But look, fans, I don't know what to say at this point. You know, I started this podcast with the hopes that we would see some glimmers of hope for this team in what was otherwise a horrendous year. And not only are we seeing no glimmers of hope, we are seeing the depths of despair. Last night, the White Sox lost 4-1 to the Oakland A's out at the Oakland Coliseum to extend their losing streak to 21, which tied the American League record for the longest losing streak in league history, set by the Baltimore Orioles in 1988. We're recording this on Tuesday morning out on the West Coast, so it's going to be an 8:45 p.m. Central start time tonight. Hopefully enough time to give you a chance to listen to this show. If the White Sox lose to the A's tonight out at the Coliseum, that will give them the all-time American League record for longest losing streak, and it will get them to within one game of the modern record for the longest losing streak in MLB history, which was set by the Philadelphia Phillies in 1961. There was an image from, and because I live out on the West Coast, I can't get the White Sox broadcast, so I have to watch the A's broadcast on NBC Sports California because of blackout reasons. And there was a shot when they were sending it from the field to the A's postgame show in studio of Miguel Vargas sitting on the side of the dugout looking like he was the saddest human on planet Earth. And you feel for Miguel Vargas because this is a guy that was at one point a top prospect in the Dodgers system. He was not a Dodger regular, but somebody that was a part of a team that could win a World Series. And while he's going to get to play every day on the South Side, he's now part of what could end up going down as the worst team in the history of modern Major League Baseball. The Chicago White Sox are 27 and 88. That's right, 27 and 88 on August 5th. I had said in our last show that the White Sox could easily get to 100 losses before the end of August. I think it's almost a guarantee that they get to 100 losses before the end of August. I think that the losing streak will come to an end at some point on this trip because the A's are not a good team themselves, but the A's actually hit homers. Brent Rooker, who was the last guy to make the roster on the 2023 team for Oakland, he's going to end up hitting 30 homers for the second consecutive year. They've got a guy in Zach Geloff who, although he doesn't have a high batting average, he hits for a lot of power. J.J. Bleday hits for a lot of power. Lawrence Butler hits for a lot of power. These A's have got a lot of power up and down the lineup. And last night, the White Sox made J.P. Sears look like Cy Young. J.P. Sears is a solid pitcher, but he's a guy that was 8-8 with an ERA a little under 4.5 coming into the game. Or at least I believe that's what it was. And they made him look incredible. Now, Andrew Benintendi, and this is the stat that I saw on last night's broadcast that just drove me insane, is that prior to his RBI single, the only run that the White Sox scored, Andrew Benintendi was hitting .091 against left-handed pitchers. That's the lowest batting average among qualified players in Major League Baseball against left-handed pitchers. This is a guy that is the highest priced free agent in the history of your franchise. If that doesn't tell you what is going on with this season, I don't know what does. And I wanted to wait because I thought that if we recorded a show yesterday that the news was going to come out that the White Sox will have fired Pedro Grifol. I said it in our last episode that we were going to be on a managerial firing watch, and I had assumed I was out and about on Sunday when the White Sox lost number 20 in a row to the Minnesota Twins. I just assumed that the White Sox were going to announce either late Sunday night or early Monday morning that Pedro Grifol had been relieved of his duties as manager of the White Sox, and Charlie Montoyo would be taking over as interim manager for the rest of the year. I assumed that. But you know what they say about assume? It means that you make an ass of you and me. And sure enough, the White Sox did not fire Pedro Grifol, and I don't believe that they are going to. I was listening to the Bernstein and Holmes show yesterday, and they do a great job at really digging in at the crux of what is wrong with the White Sox culturally. Dan Bernstein said something along the lines of how Pedro Grifol has become the ultimate brown noser, and he's snivelly and always defaulting to the greatness of Jerry Reinsdorf as a man and how much he wants to win. And then Lawrence Holmes said something really interesting. He corrected Bernstein and said, I don't think Pedro Grifol has turned into anything, meaning that he's had this suck up personality the entire time. It might be one of the reasons why he ended up getting the job as the White Sox manager when Rick Hahn hired him back in 2023. Or maybe it was Rick Hahn in consult with Jerry Reinsdorf figuring out how are we going to replace the mess that Tony La Russa left behind. And I'm sure a lot of White Sox fans are hopeful that, or are wishing that they were still back in the times of Tony La Russa. At least that 2021 team won the division. At least the 2022 team was 500. The 2022 team was ultimately a huge disappointment coming off of 2021. But at least it wasn't last year's team, which was 40 games under 500, and this year's team, which is currently 61 games under 500. I don't think the White Sox are going to fire Pedro Grifol. And I think they're not going to fire him because Jerry Reinsdorf doesn't want to increase the pay of somebody else to finish out what is otherwise a meaningless season in terms of are we going to improve this team or not? And I think he would rather just pay one guy and start fresh next year. Pedro Grifol is entering a lame duck year in 2025, which means most managers are not going to manage on a one-year contract. So Grifol is done after the year. It's just a matter of when they get rid of him. And I would have assumed that you have a 14-game losing streak, a 21-game losing streak, and a 26-game start of 3-23, that you would have gotten rid of your manager. But Lawrence Holmes made the point that Grifol should have to wear this, that this is on him. And Bernstein actually made a good counteracting point. What does Pedro Grifol actually do? What tangible evidence have we seen from this team to say that he has fundamentally improved them? Because in his introductory press conference, he was talking about all the little things, moving a runner along, hitting the cutoff man, little fundamental things that you do as a baseball team that makes a difference between winning and losing. And the White Sox do none of that. I think one of the most infuriating things for a lot of White Sox fans is going back to Andrew Benintendi. I think it was the Saturday game in Minnesota. There was a runner on first and I believe one out. And there was a fly ball deep to left center field. And Benintendi makes the catch and he just nonchalantly throws the ball back into the infield, not realizing that the runner at first was tagging up and going to second. Now, Andrew Benintendi has a terrible arm. There's no questioning that he has one of the worst outfield arms in Major League Baseball. But there was a lack of effort and a lack of awareness of this guy's going to second. Make a throw. Make a competitive throw. We saw the issue with Luis Robert earlier this year in Cleveland. It's like the team has no inspiration. And there was a report that came out that the White Sox clubhouse under Grifol is fractured, and I wouldn't be totally surprised. Now, there's been some back and forth fighting between John Schriffen, the play-by-play guy for the White Sox, and the Parkins and Spiegel show on 670 The Score, because those two seem to have it out for each other, and I don't want to get into the radio war versus the play-by-play guy war. It's not good for anybody. It doesn't do us any good here to talk about media issues surrounding the Chicago White Sox. But Pedro Grifol has not instilled the fundamentals in this team. There's a lack of fundamentals all around. And at some point, the Sox just have to put Pedro out of his misery. I don't understand why they haven't made some sort of a move. You're on a 21 game losing streak. You've already had a 14 game losing streak. And your first 26 games, you ended up going 3-23. The 3-23 start should have been grounds for firing enough. Now, Pedro Grifol, maybe at some point he gets another managerial job. I don't believe so. I think that there's a sample size that's large enough to say that he won't ever. Pedro Grifol as a manager is 88 and 189. He is 100 games under 500 as a manager. There was a stat that was put out by noted Twitter stats guru Jay Kuda. And I don't remember the guy's name for the Phillies, but there was a dentist that was the Phillies manager for 2 years during World War II. And the stats said that there are only 2 managers with winning percentages under 33.3% that have managed at least 200 games with the same team. It was the Phillies dentist, which is such a weird thing to say, and Pedro Grifol. That is a bad list to be on. And there were a couple of other stats that have been thrown out there about the futility of the White Sox. And I think that people are getting so much entertainment out of futility stats at this point. The White Sox, including last night, are 0-56 when trailing after the 6th inning. But here's the thing that is remarkable to me about that. They're 0-56 when trailing after the 6th inning. So the fact that they have no comebacks is remarkable. But the other thing is that math will tell you that they are either tied or leading 59 times after the 6th inning and have 27 wins. Tied or leading 59 times after the 6th inning and have 27 wins, which means they are, by all accounts, one of the most unclutched teams in all of baseball. And it also means that this team doesn't know how to win close games. Also, a totally random stat, they haven't won on Monday this year. I know that there's a lot of Monday off days, but the fact that they haven't won on a Monday is remarkable. I mean, you have to run into one at some point. At some point, you got to run into a win. The White Sox would still have the worst record in baseball if you took out the 14-game losing streak and the 21-game losing streak. I mean, we could go on and on and on in terms of feudal stats for this team, but at a certain point, enough is enough. And Pedro Grifol talking about, guys still fighting hard and needing to do the fundamentals right. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Your team can't hit. Your team can't hit. I mean, their highest qualified batting average guy right now, I believe, is at 235. Seriously. They don't have a single qualified player hitting above 240. And somebody also made a good point. It was AJ Przinsky talking about where the White Sox were in terms of the last rebuild. And guys that were on that 2021 team that won the division, a lot of them are either going to be on minor league deals next year or out of baseball. He made the point. Jose Abreu is currently out of baseball, got released by the Astros. Tim Anderson, currently out of baseball, got released by the Marlins. He probably is going to have to be a non-roster invitee to a spring training next year in order to have a chance to continue playing baseball. Eloy Jimenez has team options next year. The Orioles are not going to pick up the $16.5 million team option. Yohan Moncada is probably going to end up on a minor league deal somewhere because he's been hurt so much. I can't remember the other guy that he was that AJ was talking about that's probably going to end up on a minor league deal. But this team just does not have any oomph to them. They are lifeless. And how does it get better? I mean, seriously, like, how does it get better? What do you talk about to snap out of a losing streak like this? What hope is there left for this group and the future of this group? And what of this group remains going forward? I've talked about the guys that I want to stick around until 2027, but I don't know what's salvageable. And now that Garrett Crochet is going to end up being on an innings limit the rest of the year, the fun in watching him pitch kind of goes out the window. It was nice to see Kai Busch come up and make his major league debut. He's got good stuff. Walked 3 guys in the first inning. The A's scored a run before they got a hit. That's, give the guy a little bit of a break having his first start nerves, but, just unfortunate that the White Sox are in this situation. And they very well could lose their 22nd in a row tonight. They very well could win and break the streak. But then where does it go from there? One other thing that I forgot to make mention of, which I think is actually really weird, is that one of the starting outfielders on that 1988 Baltimore Orioles team that lost 21 straight games is a man by the name of Larry Sheets. Larry Sheets is the father of White Sox first baseman, corner outfielder, DH, Gavin Sheets. So you have a father-son combo that have now played for 2 teams that hold the American League record for longest losing streak. You cannot make that stuff up. That's the weird coincidental crap that only baseball stat heads could find and only some baseball stat heads could love. A couple other stats that I saw. There's a guy, Jesus Tinoco, who has played for 3 different teams since the White Sox last won a game. 3 different teams. The last time the White Sox won a game, Joe Biden was still running for president. Seriously. I think he was. July 10th? Had he dropped out by that point? I can't remember, but I think he was still in the race at that point. At least that's what I remember. But the White Sox are going to be playing their final 2 games ever in Oakland, and I want to give somewhat of my farewell to the Oakland Coliseum as a White Sox fan. I grew up here. I went to a lot of games at the Coliseum growing up. Always went to the A's and White Sox games. I remember I had great seats for one game in the April 2005 series that the White Sox were here and got a ton of autographs. Got autographs from Frank Thomas, from Ozzie Guillen, Carl Everett, Timo Perez, Jose Contreras, Freddie Garcia. John Garland, I think, signed that one ball. AJ Pierzynski was too busy flirting with some female fans to actually sign for the kids. So I was never a fan of AJ Pierzynski for that, but I'm sure that maybe he's become a little less prickly in his retired years. But I think somebody pointed it out that there are so many parallels at this point between where the White Sox are at as a franchise and where the A's are as a franchise. The White Sox have an owner that cares about all the little business things, but seemingly at this point doesn't care that much about the product on the field and wants the state of Illinois to contribute $2 billion to build a new stadium in the 78. And the A's have an owner in John Fisher who completely screwed over the city of Oakland, basically said it was Howard Terminal, which is this area down by the Oakland estuary near Jack London Square, one of the nicest areas of the city, saying that that's where we have to build the ballpark. The city of Oakland got a bunch of public funding for it. And then Fisher basically, pulls the cover over everybody's eyes and says, nope, we're leaving, because he wanted more of a handout. And apparently Las Vegas is going to give it to him. And now the A's are going to play the next 3 seasons, possibly 4, at Sutter Health Park in Sacramento, which is home to the AAA Sacramento River Cats. And I will tell you, having been there, that is not a major league facility. They can do all of the upgrades that they want. There's a limited amount of land there, and there's a limited amount of space to which they can build. Oh, and by the way, they are making that field turf, which means that legendary Oakland groundskeeper Clay Wood and his crew are going to be out of jobs because they don't need to maintain a field anymore. So a lot of people that work in Oakland are losing their jobs, which is tragic. The A's franchise has won 4 World Series since coming to Oakland from Kansas City. There's been a big movement out here about selling the team, as a lot of people have been putting sell signs up around the south side of Chicago trying to see if Jerry Reinsdorf can sell. Now, I think that the two owners are different. One of them actually loves baseball, Jerry Reinsdorf, but he just is cheap and doesn't want to invest properly. The other one, John Fisher, I don't know why he owns a baseball team. He doesn't love baseball. Nobody ever hears from him. But I go back to 2020 and the 3-game wild card series in the weird COVID format. The A's win that series 2-1, a dramatic third game. Carlos Rodon having to come out of the bullpen in what ultimately was Rick Renteria's last game as the White Sox manager. I remember Luis Robert in the White Sox win in Game 1 hitting a home run that went 488 to left field at the Coliseum, playing in front of no fans. These were two teams at the time that were on the ascent. The A's had Matt Chapman and Matt Olson that were manning the corners and a pretty good starting rotation. The White Sox had Giolito and Cease and Dallas Keuchel and Dane Dunning at that point. Garrett Crochet ended up actually making his major league debut that year after being drafted, coming out of the bullpen. There was a lot of hope. And now there's no hope for either team. Now, the A's actually have some players that people are getting excited about. Their first round pick, or their top prospect from a year ago, Jacob Wilson, has already made his big league debut and is probably going to be back on the big league roster at some point. He was injured. The A's have a closer in Mason Miller who throws 103. I don't know what the White Sox have to look forward to at this point, other than the fact that, unlike the A's, they're not moving out of the city of Chicago next year. The A's moving from Oakland to Sacramento would be like if the White Sox picked up and moved from Chicago to South Bend. That's effectively what it would be like. They're moving not so far away to where you can't go see them play, but far enough away to where it doesn't feel like the city's team anymore. Now, people would not go out and support the White Sox like Chicagoans go out and support Notre Dame football. I'll leave that right there, but I am hopeful to go over to the Coliseum for a day game tomorrow, which will be the last game that the White Sox ever played at the Oakland Coliseum. White Sox historically were not good playing out here. Oakland was a house of horrors. I don't have the win percentages up, but I have to imagine that in terms of winning percentages at ballparks away from Chicago, that this had to be one of the worst. And by the way, if you want to add insult to injury, the White Sox could end up setting the modern Major League record for longest losing streak. That is, if they lose tonight to make it 22 and then Wednesday to make it 23, they could set the modern Major League Baseball losing streak against the Cubs at home on Friday. And that, kind of like the Giants are to a lot of A's fans, because the Giants are seen as the team that has more money and the nicer ballpark and the more white collar fans, that is insult to injury enough. And I think that this series is cathartic for me personally, because I did root for the A's somewhat growing up because my mom is from Oakland. But the White Sox are my first true love. And so the two worst organizations in baseball are two that I've forever held near and dear to my heart. So it'll be sad when the White Sox walk out of the Coliseum for the final time, and it's going to be even sadder when the A's walk out of the Coliseum for the final time because there's so much history in that old building, and everything could have gone so much differently. And I hope that at some point Major League Baseball returns to Oakland, but not under the John Fisher regime. And I hope that Jerry Reinsdorf sells the White Sox because, as currently constructed, this organization will not build a winner. As for where we go from here as a podcast, I will continue, as I said when we debuted. I'll try and look back on the past. I want to look toward the future, but you can only talk so much about the present of this team without just getting really sad. It's just sad. I mean, do I want to turn on these games every night and watch this team get 3 hits and lose? Nobody wants that. That's just punishing yourself for no good reason. And I hope that there is some light at the end of the tunnel because sometimes in life, and maybe as a baseball fan, and granted, we're not going to compare this to the struggles that a lot of people face in their lives every single day, but sometimes it seems like there's no hope. And right now, as a White Sox fan, it seems like there's just simply no hope. And you see, so many people that invest a lot of energy into this team. I remember scrolling on Twitter the other day and seeing somebody post a clip with Luis Garcia from the Astros leaving the mound to na 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 hey hey goodbye during Game 3 of the ALDS, and somebody saying this was less than 3 years ago. The blackout game with Luis Garcia's home run was less than 3 years ago. The White Sox won the division in 2021. From division winners to 500 baseball team to 100 losses to potentially the worst team in the history of modern baseball. That is the regression in the last 3 years, or 4 seasons, but 3 calendar years. I hope it stops. I hope that at some point we see a light at the end of this tunnel, and maybe it takes a while for us to get there, but I'm certainly hoping that we at least see some glimmer of hope at some point in the near future. That's all we got for today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, everybody. Hopefully, the streak will come to an end. Have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk to you soon.